Episode 5 of Severance really got deep with themes of humanity, autonomy, and identity. Identity was a gigantic one, especially with Helly and Milchick ran this episode. So let's just get into it. So first, let's go identity, because they were hiding this guy's identity on purpose, obviously, and I think he could be a couple different people. One, it could just be a character we haven't met yet, but I'm thinking it could be Burt's husband or maybe even Petey. And the reason why I don't think it's a stretch to say it's Petey is because of this.
She's not dead. She's just not here. Who's in there?
They know people at the morgue.
Now remember, Mark said he saw her body and identified her. So, I mean, yes, we saw Petey die. We saw him at the funeral and all that. But I don't know. Who knows what Lumen is up to? But I also want to talk about this line when he says this.
She's not dead. She's just not here.
Because he also says this earlier in the episode about Irving.
Irving was your friend, and he's dead. Why don't you give a shit?
Because he's not dead. He's just not here.
Now, why do I think this is an important line? For a few different reasons. One, because, technically, Innie doesn't die in a way. Their Audi is still alive. So he's saying, he's still out there. And we're going to talk about the idea of Innie's dying in a minute with this line that Ms. Wong talks about, because it compounds this and I feel like opens an existential question about humanity. But the reason why I feel like this line is important is actually because of a line that Ricken says at the end of season 1.
All creatures, from the leaping cat to the cowering shrew, think of themselves as you, a logical center for the universe. Yet the cat eats the shrew, and we, like Schrodinger, live on to wonder what it means.
So what does that have to do with Mark saying he's not dead, he's just not here? Well, let's talk about Schrodinger's cat for a second. So Schrodinger's cat is a quantum physics experiment, which essentially talks about how something could be living and dead at the same time. That's like the basics of it. Now, this thing of being alive and dead at the same time, I mean, that's what happens when someone's severed, right? When they're Audi, their Innie is like dead. When they're Innie, their Audi is like dead. And then when they get fired, their Innie really seems dead, but their Audi's still alive. So this concept of being dead and alive happens at the same time. So in a way, Mark is right. Like, he's not dead. He's still alive somewhere. But this concept of Innie's dying and the fact that they can't die really speaks to our humanity as humans. So I want to talk about that Miss Wong line right now.
You shouldn't let them have a funeral. It makes them feel like people.
Now, when I first watched this, I thought this was the typical, they're just trying to dehumanize the Innies because they're just workers and they're not people and all that. But then I was thinking about it because the idea of death in this episode is prevalent. And I was thinking the thing that makes us all human is the fact that we do die, right? It's what connects everybody. And so her saying that it'll make them feel human, it's like not even on this emotional level, like they feel human, like they can feel that. Like it's more this existential question of what does it mean to be human? And death has a real big role in being human. And on top of that, if Lumen's mission, if it turns out, as people are theorizing, that it's about resurrection or living forever, if that comes to happen, does that make humans not human? That's a deep question to ponder, to be honest with you. In talking about questions, I need y'all to get in these comments and explain to me what I'm about to ask after we watch this little part with Mark S here at the beginning. This makes me so lost. I need answers.
Hey,
How was the weekend thing?
good, I guess, although my Innie fell off a rope, apparently.
A rope?
Mm-hmm.
Were you hurt?
No, I just got a little wet, that's all.
This is like a never.
There's no way he could be talking about the ORTBO from last episode. There's absolutely no way. There's no way that was a real place they brought the Audis to and then had them turn into their Innies. I just don't believe it. The TV had no power cord. They were all separate at the beginning. Why would Irv's Audi walk onto the middle of an icy lake? It doesn't make any sense. So this thing he's talking about where his Innie got wet, it has to be something else. Because also when we see Helly, look at this. You see how she's acting right there? She's all tensed up and angry. That just doesn't make sense, because remember, Innies kind of have that emotion they have right before they switch back to their Audis. So are they wanting us to believe that right after they turned Helena into Helly, they essentially just cut all their innies off and just made them their outies in that moment. So what, all the outies are just there in the outside world, and like they don't ask questions, or like they don't, like, that means Helena would have been back. And would she not have been freaking out on Milchick about her almost drowning and all this kind of stuff? I don't know. It just doesn't make sense to me. And also, wouldn't Helly be having a different reaction than just like tensing up if she's still like in the frame of mind of just getting drowned? Also, by the way, right at the end when Mark says he got wet, Devin says, Jesus, there's no stopping with these guys, something like that. And in my last video, I said there was like a biblical reference to when Helly's getting drowned, that, you know, it's kind of like her getting baptized into Heliar. And so like, Jesus is in there. I knew I was onto that. So when we go back to this scene, my wife was saying this kind of reminds her of the Matrix. You know, it's kind of like a blue pill mixed with a black pill. And the blue pill in the Matrix allows you to stay in the Matrix and the illusion, which is kind of funny because this is allowing him to get into the illusion of, you know, being severed, like being on the severed floor, I mean. Also, we see these drink things in the intro. Right here, we see Audi Mark kind of passed out on the table with the drink right here and the pills all around. So maybe he like overdoses on this stuff or something, and then his innie ends up saving him somehow. Now, we have a lot to talk about when it comes to the scene with Helena talking to Natalie and Mr. Drummond, because there's some interesting stuff here.
The medical team says your tempers will rebalance quickly.
Good to hear.
Time out. What does Mr. Drummond mean that her tempers will rebalance quickly? As we see, they're like coding tempers in the severed floor. Are they rebalancing people's, you know, tempers in the real world? Like, what does that mean? Like, is that just talk for how they work up here, as far as like, oh, your mood will get better, like just take some rest? Or are they actually like being coded up here or something? That was wild to me. Also, when Helly said,
I'm fine. Will I be updating father later?
this is the second time that Helena has used language that's almost like computer talk for people. She told Cobell that, you know, they could reset. She just said she would update father. And also, the father thing is interesting, because listen to this.
Milchick's many errors this weekend have forced our hand.
And father approves.
Father encouraged it.
Hold on a minute. Why did he say father? And also, the father was with a capital F. So is this like her actual dad, or is this like religious cult? Father, is it Kier that's inside of her dad, like everybody's talking about? Like his consciousness is uploaded, and that's the revolving, is all of the past Egans are like currently in her dad's head or something like that. But they both called this guy father with a capital F. Interesting. But once again, on this like brainwashing robot level of things, like, listen to this.
Perhaps we could arrange another obligement session this evening.
I said I'm fine.
An obligement session. Like, it just really feels like they're brainwashing these people. Like, maybe this is why Helena, Cobell, Milchick, Natalie, Mr. Drum, it's like everyone that works at Lumen has to be this completely like neutral, no emotion type person. And we see how they grill Milchick later on about the littlest of things, and it would make sense because Cobell is so neutral and monotone when she's working there. But it was like when she was around Mark, she was like she was acting completely different. And also, why is Helena Egan reporting to these two people? What like, what's going on here? And like, why is Natalie the only one that can talk to the board and not Helena, the daughter? Like, what's going on here?
We're close. Helena, what's he at? 78%?
81 as of Friday.
Okay, see, that part goes with what I'm talking about. We haven't seen Mark working on Cold Harbor, and it says he went to 81%. And the last time we saw him working on it, I believe it was in the 60s, like 60-something%. So like, I don't know if the weekend thing Mark is talking about at the beginning, like, I don't know. Something's off with the timing. Something's just off with the timing, unless I'm not paying attention to something. Once again, y'all leave it below. Please correct me if I'm wrong, but something seems off with the timing here.
My Innie who tried to kill me, and then the other one tried to kill me. They're fucking animals.
That part's funny, because she was literally fucking, last episode. But this is another time that the Innies get related to animals. Helly herself asked if she was livestock in the very first episode. And then, there's just been animal references a lot, right? And then even like with the goats and all that. I wonder what that's about. Really wonder what that's about. Once again, can't tell if it's just a way to dehumanize the Innies or if they're like pointing at something. I mean, because they definitely do dehumanize them. Like, even right then, she had said that her Innie tried to kill her, and then she said, and then the other one tried to kill me. Like, she didn't even say Irving or whatever. She just completely dehumanized him. And I don't know if that's because they're trying to erase him from existence so she couldn't say his name, right? Possibly. So now is where we really move into the identity piece of this episode, because this is where Milchick pops up. And so we're just going to spend some time here talking about Milchick and his identity and how it's so important on, like, in the show, but also it just speaks to our world, like real life. It speaks to real life a lot. And also in this scene, the first scene with Milchick, Helly also has like an identity crisis.
She doesn't have the right to take my identity.
Did y'all see that? Did y'all see the way Milchick reacted to her saying can't take my identity? And I think it has something to do with Milchick's identity being taken somehow, some way, because it keeps getting shown over and over, his identity being messed with. I think that's why this part bothered him so much. His computer's calling him Miss Cobell, and he ain't Miss Cobell. He even says that at the end, like towards the end of this episode.
You instituted kindness reforms.
Because I'm not Harmony Cobell.
And then, of course, we already have this classic scene of, you know, his identity being put onto Kier's whole story. Also, I want to play this part right here because I had said he was getting whitewashed, represented by that piece of white paper going over his face. And so I think he just relates to Helly on that a lot. Like, something's going on with his identity, especially as a black man. And I think that's why he talks to Natalie too. And it really represents how a lot of black people have to work in the workspace in real life, as far as, you know, watching what they say, which he gets reprimanded for by using too many big words, which we're actually going to talk about that later too, because I saw something about that. And so I think he's trying to relate to her on that race level, but it almost seems like they're not allowed to talk about race or something like that. Maybe it's like a Lumen policy or something. Then here, he ends up talking about how there used to be this Swedish king back in the day that used to go into his city with his people being hidden behind this gray robe, right? But he's really a royal amongst the common folk, just in plain sight. And he's saying that's what Helena was doing by taking over Helly's body. But here's the thing about that. This episode was also called Trojan Horse. And so in a way, Helena was a Trojan horse, right? Now, obviously, we also see that the Trojan horse the episode's talking about is Ricken's book that he's writing for the Innies. But this concept of hiding who you are and kind of presenting as one thing, but actually being another thing on the inside. He also talks about how Kier did that at the Ether Factory, which really makes me feel like somehow Kier is still, maybe Milchick, Drummond, all these people are somehow infused with Kier in some way. That could be a reach. I don't know. Because he said also that Helena continued, and he called it noble tradition. And so maybe that's something they like keep doing in their family, like over and over and over again. There's something else there for sure. Now, before we move talking about Helly's identity, I just want to say one more thing, and it has to do with the language bit. So in this scene, look, he says he uses too many big words, right? But what's crazy is Mr. Drummond throughout this episode continues to use complex words. And so I want to know why it's Milchick specifically that they're critiquing. Once again, I think this goes back to race in a way. And we are going to come back to this scene too, with Mr. Drummond talking about the Innie's purpose. But first, I want to talk about Helly and Mark, actually.
They know everything we're doing because Helena told them everything we're doing.
That wasn't me. Mark, look, I'm not her. I'm not. I'm me, Helly.
And how do I know that?
You don't. You just have to trust me.
Now, here's the thing that a lot of people aren't talking about with the drama between Mark and Helly in this episode is the fact of the reality is this man got sexually assaulted last episode. And so a lot of him being standoffish to Helly is because of that, right? And so like when you add in the idea of the show with the being severed and having the two different identities and everything, I'm sure for him that's like extremely traumatic. And then on her end too, when she finds out they slept together, essentially like Helena sexually assaulted both of them, like Mark and Helly, like, you know, because she didn't get consent from either one basically. And so that's definitely going to have a gigantic effect on their dynamic, because it's not just about Mark trusting that Helly's different from Helena. There's something inside of this person that just totally just violated me. And that's why when we get a shot like this where he's in between like both versions of Helly and Helena, like this shot right here was just absolutely fantastic. But in this scene, I'm wondering if Mark is having moments of being reintegrated that we're not seeing as the audience. Because right here, look at him, he's like freaking out. He's like looking in the mirror, like not really sure who he is. Like he's really trying to, like something's going on with him, right? And of course he doesn't feel good because the reintegration process, and it like gives you like symptoms and stuff like that. So that's why he puts like, look, he's freaking out. And, you know, he puts the water on his neck because he's probably not feeling good. But even right here, the way he's staring at this fruit is almost like, it's like he's at a loss. Like he's over here contemplating reality. Now, I don't know, once again, if he's just feeling violated, or maybe that one moment where it did switch into Gemma is really like affecting him. Like, what was that? But I think he may be experiencing reintegration in a way that we're not seeing as the viewer, like they're withholding some things from us. Now, if you remember at the end of last episode, Irv shouts out to Dylan and says, remember, hang in there. So a lot of people theorized that there was something with this poster, whether something was behind it or something like that, and they guessed right. It turns out to be a map of the hallway, right? That leads to the export hallway, which means one thing. It means the lady in O&D gave Irving the directions to the hallway. So I'm wondering if Innie Irv like found out. Maybe he already went down the elevator. Maybe. I don't know. But regardless, he really wants Dylan to investigate this hallway, and he had the coordinates to get there. What's going to happen when Dylan goes there in a future episode? Also, what's crazy is back in season 1, when Helly comes back into the office, Irv actually talks about like hiding things around the office for her to see to make her feel better, which I feel like foreshadows this whole thing with Dylan. Check this out.
We should hide inspirational handbook quotes around the office for her to stumble upon.
Now, remember at the beginning of this episode, I brought up the Matrix. This is definitely giving Matrix right here. You got like the code on the computer, reality glitching into the pills, green. Like it's definitely giving Matrix right here. Now, everybody's talking about the awesome line in this scene, but the line no one's talking about is the one that's like in between them, right? And then Mark crosses the line, and then Milchick ends up crossing the line, going into his half of this scene. And then that's when he says the line everybody's talking about.
Did you tell her that you fucked her outie at the ORTBO?
Now we see after Milchick got that critique about being too kind, it seems like he's gonna, really just be mean like Cobell, which actually does play into the next episode title as well. The next episode title is, I don't know how you say, it's either Attila or Attila, but I looked it up and it's like some conqueror from the Huns back in the day that was just known for being brutal.
Look, Seth. Mark Scout's completion of Cold Harbor will be remembered as one of the greatest moments in the history of this planet.
Here's something I realized when he said that I didn't think about before. Like, yes, I knew that Mark got assigned Cold Harbor, right? It made me realize that each person gets files that only they can complete. So these files have something to do with the person that's doing them. And it just makes me wonder what's so important about Cold Harbor than any of the other files everybody else is working on, if they're all unique to said person. I wonder. Like, it could have to do something with Gemma, obviously, or maybe himself, or I don't know. I have no idea. So when we get to this scene with Ricken, y'all know I have my theory that I think Ricken's evil and has been working with Lumen for some time. Okay, I do think that. But in that scene, Devin is saying, hey, this is like going against what you just wrote in your book. It's not even the same thing. And then he says it's a Trojan horse because it'll open the Innies up to actually receiving messages to try to get them out of there, right? Here's the thing, though. The reason he says he's going to do it is because it's lucrative and they're paying him a lot of money. And then he tells Devin that, and then she kind of like, okay, like you could tell she wants it for the money too. which with Ricken's character, he's kind of presented as this artist that does things for art's sake. So him admitting that he's doing it for money is definitely different from what we've seen from Ricken and have kind of like just been assuming about Ricken. So we need to keep an eye on that. When it comes to Burt being there watching Irv at the telephone, I had guessed correct. I said I think he's just tailing him because he showed up at his house and he just wants to see what's going on, see who he is. So I was right about that. But in this scene, the important part is that it's really setting up Irving going to dinner with Burt and his husband, which makes me feel like that guy pushing the cart could be Burt's husband. Now just imagine this would be crazy, right? Say next episode you see the guy pushing the cart, right? And you don't see his face. And then simultaneously you get another shot where like Irving is walking up to Burt's house. And then it's kind of like going back and forth between them. And then Irving knocks on the door and then the door opens up and you see his face. And then it switches back over to the guy pushing the cart and we see his face and it's the same person. Now that would be dramatic. But it'll be interesting to see Audi Irv and Audi Burt teaming up to figure out like what's happening, what's going on. And I still want to know who Irving is talking to on the phone. Once again, get in the comments and explain this to me because I have questions. Now, we're kind of getting some ideas of how the reintegration works, right? And so it's switching between his house and this hallway. Now, I don't understand how this has to do with reintegration. This feels more like hallucination or like dimension hopping or a whole nother reality, because this is not a memory of any Mark as far as we know. He's still in his regular Audi Mark clothes walking around the severed floor, and I didn't think this is how reintegration worked. I don't think this is how it worked with PD either. Also acting right here, just quick note, the acting here was just imagine this part, just imagine. Like, oh my God. But you see, he's even like in a different place. Like he was physically walking through his house while also walking through the lumen hallways. And I just thought reintegration kind of gave you those memories like of what happened, like Innie Mark and Audi Mark becoming one, and you kind of have the whole experience like in your mind. Like you just, you know, you become aware of everything that has happened. I don't see what this has to do with that. And it makes me wonder this, when Mark does reintegrate and that happens where like he's actually in the hallway, is that what we see right here? Like, is that somehow some version of Mark that's reintegrated and it's like somehow they can exist at the exact same time? That would go into the whole Schrodinger's cat thing as well. And so yeah, I'm not 100% sure that reintegration is just kind of bringing both of them together. It might have some type of other effect. I don't know, because then we're getting into crazy things like multi-dimensions and time travel, and I don't think this show is going to do that. But it's just odd how Mark's walking in real life down his real hallway, but then he's also traversing in the severed floor on Lumen. It's also kind of like how if there's an ability to do that with the chip, kind of like this merging of realities in a way, like could that be the tech they were using in episode 4 when it's like they're making everyone, you know, feel like they're outside, but maybe they're just walking around in some room in the Lumen severed floor, but they like, you know, think they're walking around outside. I don't know, like so many questions in this show. So yeah, this episode definitely opened up even more questions, of course it does, about how Severance work, who Milchick really is. I mean, the idea of who are you is like the dramatic question of the entire show, and we're kind of just getting that question with every single character, like who really are they? I hope we'll find out soon. But until next week, I'll see y'all.